Welcome into the Door Report. It is episode 216 on a Thursday night, April the 20th, 2023. We are powered by Alaco Fine Wood Floors. Big weekend coming up. We're going to talk all about it. VandyBoys and the Vols in Knoxville. We'll have a little bit to get to there. A little spice from Tony V before the weekend, so we'll get to that. Alaco Fine Wood Floors, family owned and operated for more than 2 decades. They are located here in Nashville, and they are Middle Tennessee's choice for premium quality hardwood floors. Since 1995, Jimmy Alaco and his army of employees have embodied the approach of taking pride in their craft and providing superior customer service. If you're interested in contacting them, you can find their headquarters out in Berry Hill, 2505 Winford Avenue. Give them a call at 615-356-0303 or look them up on the web at alacofinewoodfloors.com. Boys, are we fired up or what for this weekend? Tennessee and Vandy at Lindsey Nelson Stadium after everything that happened last year. We'll see if this group has a little bit of a chip on their shoulder. Probably not, knowing the VandyBoys. At least they'll have some juice, but they will, they'll definitely compose themselves and they won't act classless like their opponent. But Noah Shelby, Miles Studi, they land at their respective colleges, and Jason Rivera Torres commits. Evan Taylor commits from Lehigh. Stack finally landed a transfer. We'll talk about that. We'll preview the Tennessee series, and then to cap it off, college baseball analyst from ESPN, Chris Burke, will join us. Guys, vibes almost are at an all-time high for a long time. Vanderbilt Stadium's coming down, at least the end zone, which is a good thing. We've got basketball, the first transfer for Stack, and Vandy's about to sweep Tennessee. So, vibes are pretty high.
Vibes are high. The emotions are trending in the upward direction. Vanderbilt baseball did have a stumble midweek. I think we'll just kind of glide right over that and not even really discuss it. If anything, I think I could spin that as a positive, having a midweek stumble and kind of really a bad performance overall, just uncharacteristic and sloppy. But overall, man, it's surreal seeing the sections come down in the end zone from Vanderbilt Stadium. It's still Vanderbilt Stadium.
It's bittersweet.
In my memories that are coming down, and First Bank Stadium is what is replacing it in the renovated stadium in my head. But man, sitting in Section J forever has my heart inside of Vanderbilt. So it's gonna be a mixture of emotion as that project continues to move forward, and you continue to see the landscape of that kind of triplex there change. So seeing it in person was surreal as well, because we all sat together in the student section and got to watch the South Carolina series. Not the best game of that series to be seeing in person altogether, but we had a good time. The one game we go to, because I am the curse, no doubt I am the curse on Friday night, but we gave the left fielder hell out there for South Carolina. So it was a good time. The TDR experience, trademark pending, as Trevor tweeted out. But I'm more of like a fan right now, because I'm just waiting to hear what Trevor has to say about this Tennessee series upcoming this weekend.
I mean, I will say too about the stadium coming down. It's like, did you guys? I know, like, it was always like, oh, like it's gonna happen, like Vandy United, and even like before Vandy United, but like, did you guys like ever actually think like this would happen? Because it still kind of doesn't feel real. And like,
it's one thing to see the pictures, and then it's another thing to go see it and see in action. Like, this is happening. Like, things are happening.
It's also like literally so surreal.
You've been hearing it for so many years, and you've been thinking in your mind, like, since I started going to games, you've been, hearing talks of it. And then Candace Storioli comes in, and then it's happening so quickly from when she said that things were going to change and this is a new era of Vanderbilt athletics. And for the first time, I think those words have some weight, and Vanderbilt fans, like coming out of an abusive relationship in the past, are finally like, okay, maybe there's something here. The vibes, Billy.
And all you heard the past, however, 20, 30 years was, I need to see shovels in the ground, right? From every fan.
Yes.
And it's happening, right? I mean, there's no excuses anymore.
It's so weird. I totally agree. Like, your shovels in the ground. Like, if you talk to any Vandy fan, or like, even if like you went on any sort of message board, if you just communicate with any Vanderbilt fan, they're like, blueprints don't mean nothing. I want to see the bulldozers. And every time they post a photo on Twitter, I just like I keep asking my dad because my dad was at the 81 Maryland game whenever they were like renovations, and they're like, yeah, they're like no more renovations ever again. But I would like ask him like, did you like ever think that like something like this would ever happen? He's like, no. So like it's so surreal for us, but like people like parents or like people who are older than us who've been Vandy fans way longer, like
Those are the people
I
I'm happy
can't
for.
imagine that. Yes, like I cannot imagine. But I'm right there with you. With you, well, I grew up in Section M, so like for the longest time, I was like, man, I can't wait for them to tear it down, yada yada yada. And like Vanderbilt Stadium was a dump. There's no other way to put it. But like it was our dump. So like whenever I watch the live stream or I'll see photos, and I'm like, I'm so happy it's like going on, but like I'm also like, dang, like I spent a lot of hours like on those awful bleachers. And so it's a very bittersweet. It's more sweet than bitter, but it's just like, dang, like
And I have seen some fans go a little too far with like their sadness. Like on Twitter, I've seen a few comments about how are they tearing down my seats, like my end zones. I'm like, okay, are you really complaining? Are you really complaining right now?
Buddy, I'll sit on rubble if that means they keep on.
Like,
if you're like, hey,
on.
your seat is on this big old rock, I'll be like, I'll gladly sit there.
Yeah. So we'll talk more about that. We've got a whole football offseason to get to. We'll preview Tennessee. So without further ado, we're not gonna get to it yet. We'll get to it here in a second. But before we do, don't forget to follow us on Twitter at @door_report and Instagram door.report. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Our podcast is available on Anchor, iTunes, Spotify, and Google Podcast. And while you're at it, give our podcast 5 stars and review on iTunes. All right. Let's talk a little basketball and preview Vandy and Tennessee. All right, guys, let's talk a little hoops. We won't spend too much time on it, but all of a sudden, it's starting to look a little bit better, a little bit more on the positive side of things. You have a couple more exits with Noah Shelby and Miles Stute. Shelby has landed at Rice. I don't think that surprises a whole lot of people. Miles Stute, and we talked about this, guys, the SEC to SEC transfers. I know you love that, Will. You love seeing him going to another SEC school, but he lands at South Carolina in a brutally tough weekend for Carolina. I mean, they lose the series to Vandy, and they get Stute. But no, with all due respect, I think he will fit decently. Now, we'll see how he shoots because he's a shooter, right? So we'll see, and he'll come to Memorial. That's going to be interesting. Stute will be back at Memorial with the Gamecocks, I think, if I'm not mistaken. So, guys, real quick thoughts on Shelby and Stute. Will, are you surprised where those guys landed, or do you think those are two pretty good landing spots for them that you expected?
Shelby, actually, I had just completely checked out on Noah Shelby news. So right before this podcast, I actually asked, I was like, where did Shelby land? And it was Rice. And that did surprise me a little bit. I mean, I'm not saying that he necessarily is 100% a Power 5 talent. I almost just expected him to land at another Power 5 program. He had quite a few offers coming out of high school, and he was a 4-star prospect. And we actually had him on this podcast here. Yeah. I don't have his 24/7 profile pulled up here in front of me.
4-star.
Yeah, I'll have to pull that up. But
he had some big
on
time
the Miles Stute. On the Miles Stute is I have no problem with Miles Stute. I think he's a good player. He adds that needed asshole to a team. He takes on that villain role. But it's in the same conference drives me insane. And anybody that says it doesn't bother you a little bit seeing guys transfer to in-conference rivals is lying, or they're not a real fan. In the SEC, it just means more. And when you see a guy like Jordan Wright going to LSU, that one I can almost say, okay, that's where he grew up. He grew up in Louisiana. That was probably the school he grew up a fan of. Now is the opportunity in a career that's probably not going to end in being drafted but into the NBA. He can play in his hometown school with family close by. That one I can write off a little bit more, but it's just seeing it over and over. Football and basketball. Yeah. I think last podcast we dug into it more and actually listed off the names of football guys that have transferred to schools, including
Trevor was just
Tennessee
rattling
Volunteers them off. In state. Trevor keeps a list, a mental list. That anger inside
all my
is what
enemies
fuels
all my enemies
over there.
Everybody who's been this season.
Oh gosh. It is. It's such like with Miles though. I just is South Carolina like really like that great of a fit for him? Like it just seems like I don't know,
Well,
man. That just seems like a weird spot for him.
they've fallen, right? They made the Final Four, what, 4 years ago? I think something like that. And then they haven't made the tournament since. Frank Martin,
Yeah.
I think, got fired. So they've fallen. They've got a good coach, Lamont Paris from Chattanooga. So, I say
Yeah.
good fit because they need him, right? They need him. They need a guy like him, right? I don't
You
think
just
they shot
shooters and bodies, probably.
Yeah, I don't think they shot the ball very well. I think that's why I say he's a good fit. I don't know if you agree with that, Will, but I just think, and it's a new setting for him, right? That might be another good thing for him.
Yeah.
Yeah. And seeing a little bit of the roster movement that we'll get into after we finish this topic, I think there may have been some conversations between Stackhouse and some players that I don't really want to give too strong of an opinion either way, because we won't know. Those are in program conversations. So which direction these guys were these choosing to transfer out, or were these kind of nudged out, or were these really like they had a meeting and said, hey, you need to find somewhere else to play? That's what I don't want to touch on and get too far into. But the Noah Shelby part, I did pull up his recruiting profile. I just don't want it to be lost in the weeds of how many offers this guy had and who he chose Vanderbilt over, and how big of a commitment him alongside Lee Dort was at the time of their commitments prior to him transferring out. And, things didn't work out. But he had offers from Arizona State, Arkansas, Auburn, Baylor, California, Georgetown, Kansas, Memphis, Mississippi State, Oklahoma State, SMU, TCU, Texas A&M. That's a pretty good offer sheet for Noah Shelby right there. So that was the only surprise, I would say. I think Malik Dia landing at Belmont wasn't a surprise and was like, that's a really good fit.
Yeah.
I think he's going to succeed in that Belmont offense, and he's going to put up some good numbers at that mid-major level. So Noah Shelby's a little surprising.
And you never know how these high school players are going to translate, right? I mean, they could be a 4-star, but they just might not be physically ready. They never developed like their coach wanted them to, right? There's a lot of factors that go into that. But Will, you're right. I mean, we came into this season saying Shelby is going to play, right? He is that good. Now, again, it didn't play out that way, but good for him. He found a place at Rice, his hometown in Texas. He will play there. Right. They weren't very good last year. They were 19-16, I think 8-12 in the Conference
He's
USA.
Put up numbers.
But speaking of that conference, that's a great conference. I mean, they had FAU went to the Final Four, MTSU, solid team, right? He's going to a good conference, good competition. So good for those guys. But yeah, Trevor, I think you bring up a good point with Studi. It will be interesting to see how he fits. That's sort of my prediction.
Really weird. Yeah, like I don't like, and I'm not gonna act like I know like the exact scheme, offensive and defensive, that South Carolina runs, but just like, and I guess this is also too because he was a Vanderbilt Commodore all his career, but to be like Miles Studi, South Carolina, like it feels like if he went to Georgetown or something like that, I'd be like, okay, like
DC,
makes sense. Like, but like I don't, they're just I look at it and I'm like, ugh, it's kind of gross. Like I don't know how else to say it, and I have nothing to base it on. It's purely like I looked at the tweet and I was like, ugh, like you know what I mean? It's simply just vibes.
He committed on Sunday, right? When Vanderbilt when they took the series.
I do want to say, if you're talking about fit,
go
that's
ahead.
a good question. I can't remember. You're way past what my memory's capable of.
It was either Sunday. It was either Sunday or Monday, but that doesn't matter. Yeah. Well, what were you going to say?
Well, all I was going to say is if Miles Studi's concern, is getting to showcase his offensive skill set, that's where you could say maybe it is a good fit, because South Carolina was pretty bad offensively. Right, I just pulled up their Ken Palm rankings, and they were the worst offensive team in the SEC, according to adjusted offensive efficiency, ranked 205th in the country.
What was their net?
Uh,
I love bringing up the net.
Oh God,
the triggered video,
it'll never end.
every triggered meme that you can think of right now is what hearing the words NCAA net does inside my brain. It just destroys everything I was thinking before that.
Oh well, was just the Arthur Fist personified.
Oh man. So Studi
He's just leaving.
Studi lands at South Carolina, Shelby at Rice. We'll continue to track. I don't think anybody else is leaving. At least I hope for Vandy fans' sake. But they added a couple guys.
It's really, I mean, it's really the only one that's
the
like
only
a question mark, really.
That's the only other guy on the fence. Yeah, and you got to believe with the addition of a couple more players, he may look a little bit more appealing to come back. So let's talk about those two guys. Jason Rivera Torres, obviously more of a probably not an immediate help, maybe, who knows, but he's more of a future type guy. Chose Vandy over A&M, FAU, decent offer sheet, San Diego, Fordham. He's the fourth commitment in the 2023 class, and all of a sudden, guys, this class isn't all that bad. 32nd overall in 24/7 composite and 7th in the SEC. So obviously not great, but it's respectable. So
it'll play.
Yeah, I mean that'll play. So he's a big guy though. I think he's like 6'6", 6'7", kind of a versatile combo guard type player.
Not done growing either.
No, and that's a guy that you could see staying in the program, right? I mean, we look at freshmen but who knows? I mean, we've seen freshmen under Stackhouse leave after 1 year. So who knows? But the more important player, guys, is Evan Taylor from Lehigh. Jerry Stackhouse has landed a player out of the transfer portal, 6'6" forward, 4-year starter at Lehigh, averaged 14 points, 6.5 rebounds. He shot 43% from deep last year. In 4 years, he's played a lot of basketball, 105 games played at a decent conference level, right? Patriot League. So
average 7 boards a game.
Yes. Second team all conference last year. And that's good competition, guys. The Patriot League is good. He played Wisconsin, I think it was last year, and had 20. Wisconsin was after him, right? So they wanted him. He had some big time schools after him. Wisconsin, Georgia, Virginia Tech. So 1 year left, right? So he's going to be an immediate help. I would imagine he starts right away. I'm not trying to predict the lineup too early, but you look at his game, guys, and I know y'all have seen the tape. Well, he looks like he can come in and help right away.
Can play the 2 through the 4 in what I imagine will be a pretty loose guard heavy rotation from Jerry Stackhouse with what rotation is possible with kind of a thin roster overall. He's 6'6", 205. Billy, you said 43% from 3. There you go. You lost Miles Studi. You can bring in another guy that has shown he can shoot the ball from 3. And last year wasn't a blip. That 43%, that wasn't, out of nowhere. The year before that, he shot 41%. The year before that, 38%. His freshman season, 36%. So that's improvement.
Pretty consistent.
Yeah, consistent growth year over year. So if that can continue, or at least stay the same, you're replacing Studi in that way. You're not going to be able to replace everything you lost in Jordan Wright. That's a guy that's been with the program for 4 years. But Evan Taylor, from what I read, I'm not going to pretend that I watched a ton of Lehigh basketball, the Lehigh Mountain Hawks.
Hawks.
Evan Taylor's going to provide a little bit of versatility. He's going to be able to play the 2, 3, or 4. That's another guy like Tyron Lawrence that you can pair with and see how he plays with as well. But I was reading, Robbie actually made a comment. I can't remember who asked the question. And Robbie said that Jordan Wright is probably, overall a better player. And I guess we'll see based on how the performance this year out of Evan Taylor, but paired with who is currently on the roster, including Ezra Mignon, that this may be a better fit with Mignon's skill set and what he does driving and dishing, having another spot up type shooter, especially if Lawrence comes back. So this is exactly what we have been saying the last couple of weeks. This is why I don't think this podcast had gone into full panic mode. Is everything fixed with this one commitment and this one transfer? And no, but it is. It kind of is fixed. It's like, okay, there is a little bit of a plan.
There's
like
life.
This whole program isn't just imploding in front of our eyes. Yeah. You said, I think you tweeted, Trevor, Stack is awake. He was asleep and
risen.
now he's awake, baby.
I
And
saw
his
another
wrist-
tweet. I saw another tweet. The grease is on the pan. Stack is cooking.
He's cooking with peanut oil, baby.
There you go.
But Trev, I agree with Will though.
Yeah,
It looks like he's gonna fit perfectly with Mannion and Lawrence.
I think so. Yeah, what you need with losing Miles Studi, and even Jordan is you're gonna need somebody because Ty can crash the boards. I mean, obviously Ezra might be the best whenever it comes to just maneuvering. He might not be better than Ty, but you have two guys who can crash the boards like that. And then, of course, hopefully if Lee Dort makes a big step forward. But what you need shooters. If you get Ty back paired with Evan Taylor, like you have two really, really, really good shooters. And then, of course, you have Colin Smith, who's probably going to play a 3 or 4 kind of hybrid. And if he takes a step forward, I think really I think Vandy basketball is a big or two away from. I don't want to say they're scary, but if they get a big, I'd be like, okay, like we got something in the works here. You know what I mean? Especially if you can get Ty back. I mean, my goodness. But I mean, let's say hypothetically speaking, Tyron comes back. 1 through 4, you're pretty solid.
Really good.
Like 1 through 4, you're especially 1 and 2. That backcourt. I mean, we've talked about it. That backcourt, if Ty comes back, is one of the best that Vanderbilt has had in a very, very long time. Not to mention you got guys like Paul Lewis, and so I think if Lee Dort and Colin can take big steps forward, and then get just a 4 or 5 in the portal, somebody preferably over like 6, 7. Like I think you can make some things work.
Yeah, you don't need a Robbins, right? You don't need another all-world dominant 5, right? I mean, you would like to have a guy like that, but with these guards, Smith, you're starting to find some depth in the backcourt. You just need a solid big that is athletic enough, right, to compete with SEC 5 men and body them up, right, too, Will. So I don't think you need a Robbins. I mean, maybe Stack goes and gets one, and
you need a guy who can get 7 to 10 points a game.
Yes.
I think the big man, yes, it would be great to get a 7-footer, but you just need another big body because Lee Dort is going to get in foul trouble. I think that is the big concern for me right now looking at this roster, is not saying that right now 1 through 5, 1 through 6, I think it's probably the most talent that Stack has accumulated. But realistically, looking at how games are going to play out, looking at how Lee Dort plays in general and what we saw in limited minutes from him as a freshman, he's going to get in foul trouble. So you need a big man that can play solid minutes consistently. Yes, and you don't have QMB sitting behind him.
You just have one big on the roster right now.
Which is kind of crazy to think about right now.
So I just want to plug one name. I don't know if you guys have heard of him, kind of a big name in the transfer portal. I know we've mentioned it before. I think Hunter Dickinson.
Knew it.
I'm thinking that's the guy right there. Yeah,
that's
the
all
connection.
News,
Stack Juwan.
There's
Howard
no way
coming
he
from
comes.
Michigan, played in Memorial. If he committed to I know this is a pipe dream. This is my tinfoil hat, and I think we said the same thing last podcast, maybe. But dude, if he committed, look at that 1 through
Final
5.
4.
Oh my God. I mean, you go from thinking that 2 weeks ago this program is in shambles and Stack is going to be gone to like, this is a team that's going to compete for the SEC and is like a no doubter NCAA tournament team if you added him. So Hunter Dickinson, that's my pitch to you. And then Tyron Lawrence withdraws his name from the NBA draft, and Vanderbilt would be back, baby.
Are the doors back? That's the question.
Stack also, is too. I think something that we shouldn't gloss over now, because it's been like, other than baseball, it's been the main talking point on like Vandy Twitter and within like Vandy circles. Jerry apparently, and I think this broke after our pod last week, so I don't know if we've really discussed it, but Jerry no longer on the NBA coaching market. So
we haven't discussed the old tweet yet, have we?
Yeah. I don't think we have. I think that broke after our last pod.
Yeah, like the day after. Yeah.
He shot it down on Twitter, and you get a transfer in the portal. So it looks like Jerry's back.
I think he is.
I
think Jerry's back. Will, you agree?
I think he's back. I mean, also randomly, this is super random, kind of on topic here. I got a text from one of my buddies that I went to high school with and I grew up with. He lives across the street from Michael Curry.
Ooh,
So that's a very
Ooh.
random little tidbit. And he said that Stack apparently has been over and had a couple meetings in recent weeks. So
interesting.
that's a
Scoot.
random little scoop over here. We'll see what other information I can gain from that, which is possibly nothing. But I do love the tweet that Stack put out. I mean, finally, I guess he said something. We don't know what actually went on behind the scenes, but
So here's
back
my thing, and
for better or worse. Is this going to be an annual thing? Like if Vanderbilt makes an incredible run, are we going?
That's
to
what I'm wondering.
Continuously
That's what I'm
see
wondering.
his name brought up over and over. I think so. I don't think this is the last time that we're going to see that.
And I think part of Jerry wants that and likes that, right? I mean, who doesn't, right? Your name in the news. And Eric Bossi, the guy that reported it from 24/7 Sports, is one of the most respected, writers in college basketball, right? Like
there was real smoke around that. Like that wasn't that wasn't a fan theory. Like there were Pistons, like phone calls. Yeah.
Yes, the Pistons were interested in Stack, and Stack was somewhat interested in the Pistons. Like, that was not a fake news, false report. I mean, Eric Bossi does a great job. Now, my thing with Stack is, I don't know that you need the tweet, but I think there are some positives to it, right? He's staying. I mean,
let me rephrase what I said. I like the act of tweeting out that he is staying. I'm not saying that the execution was perfect, and I loved the exact tweets that were sent.
I figured that's where you were.
I did like him calling Jared Stillman a clown. I liked him calling Stillman a clown, so I could get behind that.
That was pretty.
That's my ball coach, baby.
But yeah, Trev, one more thing on basketball. We'll get to baseball here, but I literally had in my notes, Vandy, you pick up a solid big man, all of a sudden this looks like a tournament team. So I think I don't want to get too far, but that's what it feels like, right? And you don't have a ton of depth, right? But I don't know that you need it, right? If you have 3, maybe 4 guys off the bench that you go to and you have a tighter rotation, that might be better in the SEC and in college basketball today. So we'll talk.
Speaking of that, like I totally agree. I think, and Jerry even made those comments whenever Vanderbilt got snubbed is regarding the schedule. He's like, sorry, VCU, sorry, all these HBCUs who you want to showcase, but all these mid-majors, like, you're not getting scheduled anymore. And so I think also with that, like you said, is you're going to go into opening tip and Jerry's going to be running a tight road immediately. Like, it's not going to be like Will said, it's not going to be like January. Like, that era of basketball is over. You're going to be running a tight 7, maybe 8-man rotation.
These are my guys. I'm winning with them.
And I'm not saying that the state of the current roster is where you want it and depth is where you want it. But on the other side is positionless basketball and the flexibility that these guys have. Colin Smith, assuming Tyron Lawrence is back, transfers in. I mean, these guys aren't stuck playing like, I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but Liam Robbins plays the 5. QMB plays the 5. Malik Dia plays the 4. Miles Studi plays the 3. Like, these are guys that are very set in what positions they can play and how much flexibility you have. So you may not have as many numbers in rotation, but if your goal is to play 7, 8 guys from start to finish of the season, there's no figuring out the broader rotation. How this current roster is set up, if you can get one more big man in, is about where you would want it. Like you guys said, because Stack made those comments publicly. Like, I don't think there's any mess around time. I mean, it's go from day one, game one.
It's go time. Buckle up, because this is the season, right? And Stack knows it. And I love that you said that, because it feels like this group next season will gel, right? I don't know necessarily why right now at the moment, but I feel like Tyron and Evan Taylor, looking at their the way they play, they're both lefties, they're both sort of slashers. Ezra, it feels like there will be some good gelling with this group, right? I mean, there's still transfers, there's still 3 scholarship spots open, right? And we'll continue to talk about where they go in that. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting to see what happens down the stretch here with Vanderbilt basketball. Stackhouse is here to stay, and it looks like Vanderbilt might be. Not yet, but they might be on their way to that. So we'll talk all about basketball here in a little bit along the next couple weeks. But guys, Vanderbilt, Tennessee this weekend. 3-game series, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 5 o'clock on Friday, Saturday at 11 a.m. Early start Saturday.
Dude, Eastern time zone sucks.
I know. 5 o'clock? What is that? So
11 a.m. I mean, it's like I'm watching Vanderbilt UNLV again.
Yeah, wake up with the VandyBoys. And then Sunday, I think it's noon, if I'm not mistaken, Trev. So we will.
I believe that is right.
Yep, it's noon. So, and guys, national TV audience, SEC Network Friday, Saturday and Sunday, ESPN 2. So I think ESPN wanted Tennessee to be a little bit better, maybe in the top 10 like they were expected to be. But nonetheless, it'll still be a fun series, fun atmosphere. We'll get to it. But real quick, I want to ask you guys about the loss on Tuesday. And again, I don't think it means a whole lot, but it's a little concerning, a little bit, right? 10-2 loss to Indiana State. And Trev, you look at it and you kind of ask yourself, man, how did that happen? But then again, you say, okay, they've only lost, I think, one other midweek before this. And they've got a huge series coming up in Knoxville. Their in-state rival that swept them last year. So God forbid you overlook a good Indiana State team that has some history with Vandy. So I don't think it's a whole lot. Yeah, I don't think it's a whole lot to worry about, Trev. But was there anything concerning about that Tuesday?
The pitching was definitely concerning. I know it was a bullpen game, and I know that you used a few more arms on the weekend. But like Corbin said in the post game, he had a great comment. He's like, hey, these midweek guys are on scholarship too, and even though they're midweek guys, they are expected to produce. Yep. So the starting pitching, the pitching as a whole was not good. The bats were not good. Is that a game that Vanderbilt should win? Absolutely, yes. I know Indiana State is a great team. Like we said, they'll probably shoot up.
Good group.
But at this current, yes. Number 19 RPI in college baseball. Very, very good team. One of probably the better defensive teams that I think Vanderbilt's played this year. I mean, they were snagging everything that was hit.
They were ready to play.
They were very much ready to play. They're a good ball club. Should Vanderbilt have won the game? Yes. Is it concerning? Yeah, a little bit. Like the pitch was great. Like I think there's reason to be like, okay, like that wasn't good. But I also said on Twitter, like I could spin zone this. And the more I think about it, I don't even know if this is like a crazy spin zone because we all follow college baseball. Everybody who listens to this is a college baseball fan. And this is not just like a college baseball statement. Like this is a universal like sports statement is you don't want to peak too early. Mm-hmm. So should Vanderbilt have won that game? Yes. Am I disappointed they lost? Yes. Could this possibly be a good thing? Possibly. Like I said, possibly. Yes. This very much could go in Vanderbilt's favor to where like a sort of a kick between the legs, like wake up call. I mean, those Tim Corbin postgame comments were scathing. Like he was pissed off. And so I don't want to be like a sunshine pumper, but like you said, Billy, I mean, you just come off a big series win against South Carolina. You had this midweek game. You're kind of like,
It was a trap game.
Right before you. And now, like, you want to go out and beat their tail. So it was a weird game, but I'm not trying to put too much stock into it. But I think the pitching was a little bit concerning.
Okay, I just had to say one thing. I think it's known if anybody listens to this podcast, and you guys know I'm definitely number 3 in college baseball knowledge on this podcast, and we don't pretend or make any qualms about it. It is what it is. I watch. But I had to quadruple check this because I just don't think it got enough play and how this game was discussed. Indiana State isn't just highly ranked in they're number 12.
They're legit
in the RPI. They are very highly ranked above Texas.
Oh, wow.
Okay. Yes. This is a team that is extremely good. And so, for example, this 3-game series that this midweek game was a quote-unquote trap game because it is Indiana State. I mean, Tennessee's 41st in the RPI. So just for context, this Indiana State team was damn good. I'm not saying I was watching Sycamore baseball. on whatever app you can possibly watch that on, maybe ESPN Plus.
Flow
But
Sports.
just from looking at this,
Hello.
there's more to it than meets the eye. And I also have to give a shout out, because we haven't mentioned it, to the Tennessee Tech Golden Eagles.
I was going to mention that.
Tennessee Vols.
Yep.
12-5
Will,
in their midweek game.
On the contrary, Tennessee Tech is awful, right? So anybody comparing the Vandy loss to Indiana State and the Tennessee loss to Tennessee Tech, saying, "Oh, both these teams must be looking ahead to this weekend." No, Indiana State,
Also,
like you said.
Yeah, go ahead, Spilly. I'm so sorry.
I was just gonna say Indiana State, like you said.
265 in the RPI is Tennessee Tech. Just for
so that's
11
the
and 24. 11 and 24 on the season.
That's the comparison we're talking about.
And like I said, like, should Vanderbilt have won this game? Yes. Like, they totally should have. They're the better team. Should there be reason for concern? Yeah, some. But like you said, Tennessee lost. Not only did Tennessee lose, LSU also lost to the Ragin' Cajuns. So it wasn't like it was a
the
very,
SEC,
very weird Tuesday. It was
the
very
SEC
strange.
Really struggled in the midweek. They went 9-4, I saw. So there were 4 teams that lost to a mid-major in the midweek, right? So it happens.
Yeah.
So So
it's not going to
again,
cap your season, guys, and it's not going to hurt our RPI.
No, they're fine. But again, they can't let. I do think you hit on something that I want to get to a little bit later in their pitching depth, right? They have phenomenal pitching depth, but with these injuries, right, to a guy like, maybe not injuries, but fatigue issues with a guy like Owen, Holton, right? So I think we'll get to that more. Yeah. But last weekend, guys, again, we haven't got a chance to talk about it. They picked up 2 out of 3 over South Carolina, despite some pitching issues, right? I just mentioned Carter Holton. He's been rock solid, but he struggled. They pushed him back to Saturday, and he didn't get out of the first inning. And I was actually there in the infield that game, and it was weird. He was Corbin after the game said he looked like he was overthrowing, right? He was hitting 96, 97 when he usually doesn't. So he was a little out of the zone, a little hectic, but I think the bullpen that came in, Grayson Carter and who's the other guy? I think it was Patrick
Riley.
Yes.
Patrick Riley was the MVP of the series, in my opinion.
I agree, because they needed that. Obviously, they needed the Saturday win, right, to tie it. But, I mean, he came in there and just dealt. And we haven't seen that. And
he's had a rough season.
Yeah.
Rough is relative.
Years.
But for him, like, he has not been on top of his game. Like, whenever they threw Patrick Riley out there, I'm not going to lie. Like, I was with my dad. I was like, it's over. And he just went out. Dude, he just pitched gas.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, on the season, Patrick Riley has a 4.85 ERA in 19 innings pitched. Like, that's not good. And so only 23 strikeouts, which that's impressive. But I mean, yeah, he's not been good. And he's kind of been not a midweek guy, but like, he's seen a lot of action in midweek games. I haven't been putting him in these high pressure weekend situations. And so to throw him out there, man, and for him to do what he did, man, shout out to him. He was my MVP of the series.
I agree. I couldn't agree more. I thought Futrell, you could argue him Sunday, but Riley was the one that won, that got them over the edge, right? They needed that. They were down 4-0. They needed a guy to come in and just kind of stabilize them. And he was able to do that. So meanwhile, guys, Vandy's offense is the best in the SEC right now in conference play. They're hitting .321 in league play. They've scored 27 runs more than second place LSU. So, I mean, they're dominating. They're rolling. Yes, the schedule has been light, but that's not, I mean, this is the SEC, right? I mean, yeah, you could say Ole Miss, Mississippi State are the 2 worst teams, but you're playing SEC competition. So I've heard a lot of that. You play who's on your schedule, right? You play who's in front of you. They're outscoring SEC opponents 147-63 this season, and they sit in first place in the East, 2-game lead over Florida. That's the good news, right? That's the good news with Vandy. The bad news is, of the 5 remaining series, they've got, let's see, I lost my script here. Oh, there it is. Florida, Arkansas, and Kentucky, right? Florida with Jack Caglione and his 45 homers, they got to go to Gainesville and play Florida.
Yeah.
Arkansas, right? Always tough. Kentucky, kind of an upstart team this year. So, and then next up is Tennessee and Knoxville. So it gets tougher, guys. This is where the rubber meets the road for Vanderbilt baseball. So, and Will, that's what you talked about a lot at the beginning of the season, right? You know, yes, the schedule is lighter, but it'll balance out, right? This is the SEC where this is the best of the best, right? I mean, Georgia, they swept Georgia. Georgia went and fought with Florida last week. I mean, they almost beat Florida. So anything can happen in the SEC. So real quick, guys, before we preview Tennessee, any other kind of lasting comments on the state of this team, where they're at right now?
I just have to say that my opinion on the light schedule. Like, yeah, okay, maybe Vanderbilt hasn't played LSU, but like you said, Billy, you play who's on your schedule. And let's not pretend like every other team that has a good conference record hasn't played a majority of the teams at the bottom of the conference, because that's how it works. You play 3-game series. Each team has played 5 series so far. So if a team has done well, the teams, we're still not past that threshold yet where you could truly like give the tiers. I don't think. I think you're starting to see it form. Like, clearly Vanderbilt and LSU are the top dogs in my opinion this year. But
Agreed.
as far as where everyone else shakes out in the middle of the pack, I mean, you just played number 6 South Carolina and you won the series. When Ole Miss came into town, they were ranked number 4 in the country, and obviously they're 3-12 now in conference, so some things have corrected. But it's not like these teams have been rolling into these series and it's like these are obviously the worst teams in the conference. Like, everyone's going to roll through these guys this year, and then later on we'll really see who this Vanderbilt team is. Like, that's not the SEC. Every single team in this conference has a ton of talent, and any given night, anyone truly can beat anybody and pick up a couple games and win a series. So this Tennessee series this upcoming weekend, I think it's time for some sins to be atoned for, and it's really all I can think about right now.
It's living rent-free in my head. It's all I've thought about this week. It's all I've thought about.
Here we go. Here, let's talk about it. Tennessee was swept by Arkansas last weekend in Fayetteville, so they're coming off a sweep. Right, Vandy's coming off a huge series win. So where's the mindset?
They got the hell kicked out of them for 3 games.
Yes, and they looked awful. I mean, they looked terrible. And Tennessee, they're hitting only 240 in conference play. That's bottom of the league. So polar opposite of Vandy. They've also got the most strikeouts in the league. So they're struggling at the plate and they're struggling defensively, right? They scored just 7 runs against Arkansas in the whole series. They committed 5 fielding errors. Oh, and they also lead the league in errors at, I think, 23, Trevor, I think it is.
Yep.
That is correct. Which is a wild. I mean, 23 errors.
Abysmal.
I mean, that's awful. They have the lowest
with a month of baseball left.
Yeah, I mean,
that's not including postseason. A month of regular season baseball. That's insane.
Yeah, I mean, we're at the halfway point, right? 23 errors. You got to try to really be that bad. So they've struggled in the infield. But guys, they're on the NCAA bubble, right? I mean, after last season, the greatest season in college baseball history, Tennessee fans are saying, all of a sudden they're at risk of missing the tournament this year. And that's a fact. Like, they are on the bubble. I've seen them as a low 2 seed, but most of these college baseball bracketologists, if you will, have them as a 3, right? A power 5 3. You don't see that typically. You usually see mid-majors there. So that's where they're at. The rotation, they announced it. Andrew Lindsay is going to go Friday, a young kid they've got. Chase Dolander on Saturday and Drew Beam on Sunday. For Vandy, only 2 guys we know are officially going to start, right? Carter Holton on Friday. He's going to go Friday. And then Devin Futrell Sunday. We don't know who's going to start Saturday. And Trevor, I think that's the key in this series, right? What does Vanderbilt get out of their Saturday starter? Because Friday, you know what Holton's going to give you, right? I know he struggled last weekend. He was battling some fatigue. Holton's going to give you a great performance, right? I mean, you got to believe. Futrell.
Last Saturday was an outlier. Like, that was an anomaly. Like, don't let that freak you out.
Yeah, meanwhile, Futrell, besides Paul Skeens, I mean, statistically, he's the best pitcher in the SEC, right? Right behind. He's right behind Paul Skeens statistically. So you know what he's going to give you. What do you get Saturday? So I'll be interested, Trev. I don't even Saturday have maybe. Is it Cunningham? Is it Riley? Is it a younger guy? Is it Carter? Who knows? I think that, or do they send Owen out there?
If they sent Hunter Owen out there, I mean, But here's the thing. And I think that would surprise me because, like, I don't think they don't need to throw Hunter Owen out there to get a sweep. Like, I think it'll be Bryce Cunningham. I think it looks like he's going to be the guy in the future. I think he'll be the Saturday guy. I think probably what Tim Corbin will do is he'll probably do what he did like last Saturday, to where instead of starting on Friday, Bryce Cunningham will start on Saturday. And then you probably have someone like Patrick Riley if things go
ready
haywire.
to go. Yep.
Because Patrick Riley, his style, whenever he's hot, like he's like that old school, like just feed him innings. Like that's what he does. Exactly. And so if stuff goes haywire and you maybe only get 3 or 4 innings out of Cunningham, you can bring in a guy like Patrick Riley and let him shut it down until it's time to bring Maldo in or somebody else. But I think Saturday is probably going to be Bryce Cunningham. I think they need to throw Hunter Owen. I mean, I really don't. Like, this Tennessee team is not good.
Yeah, I agree, and I don't think we can forget that enough, right? Like, and I've been prone to do that this week. You know, thinking about the matchup, saying, you know, oh, they swept Vanderbilt last year, but I can't get over how quickly and how far Tennessee has fallen this year, right? I don't want to make this too much about Tennessee, but I mean, let's face it, that they were one of, right? I mean, in all honesty, one of the most dominant teams in college baseball history last year, right? And I'm not going to say but I mean, they had a historic season. Yeah. And they bring in some portal guys, and it's like they've fallen to pieces, Will. I mean, it's incredible to see how quickly they've dropped. So what's their mindset? I mean, that's what I'm looking at, right? And does the crowd show up with the same juice that they do normally, at least for SEC series? So, well, I'll say this about this series. It's never easy to go into another SEC team stadium and beat them in a series. But this Tennessee team is different, totally different than last season, right? Throw everything you saw last season out the window, because this is a totally different group.
Yes, I will. You said that last year's Tennessee team was a very, very good baseball team. And I think if you get down to the root of it, that every SEC fan would say, yes, last year Tennessee's baseball team was very good. They were the best team in the SEC. Last year, they had the best record in the regular season. They won the SEC tournament, but they peaked at the wrong time. Trevor, you said it. You want to be playing your best baseball at the right time. It's a tough balancing act. That Tennessee team ended the year 13-5 after their historic start of 12-0 to start out the year, and then they were knocked out by Notre Dame in the Super Regionals. That's not the greatest season in the history of college baseball. I hate to tell you, orange and white fans, but the number one stat that I saw circulating around, went in and checked it, but Tennessee has given up the most stolen bases during conference play. Yep. They have had 25 stolen bases attempted on them in SEC play. 24 have been successful. They've only thrown out one attempting stealing. I don't know how to phrase what I'm trying to say, but you get what I'm trying to say.
Attempted base stealer. Yeah, I guess.
Vanderbilt is going to take advantage of that weakness, and they are going to exploit it and exploit it and exploit it. And that is going to be why I am so confident going into this series. Even though you mentioned it, Billy, it's hard to go anywhere in the SEC on the road and come out with a series sweep or even just winning that series. But this Tennessee team is awful defensively. I think that's kind of a staple of Tim Corbin's program, and I think that's a staple of every great baseball program, is that's kind of taken for granted. I won't say taken for granted, but not appreciated as much as it should, and only really noticed when it is bad, having a high error percentage. Tennessee's ranked pretty much dead last in every fielding percentage category you can find, while Vanderbilt's near the top. And then just reiterating the dominance of Vanderbilt's bats. I know you mentioned it, Billy, and we've said it, but in SEC play, Vandy's for number one in conference, the only team hitting above 300 in batting average. They're batting 321. They're also number one in slugging percentage, OBP, runs scored, hits, RBIs, doubles, and total bases. So
every category.
Pretty much every category outside of home runs and triples. This Vanderbilt offense is at the top, and they're also number one in ERA as well. So this Vanderbilt team, as much traction as LSU, and as much as LSU is talked about as the golden child for whatever reason of this conference, Kentucky's #1 in RPI, Vanderbilt sitting at like 7th for whatever reason, I think. This Vanderbilt team is proving it in conference play week in, week out. So, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not concerned at all going into this series.
Will, you mentioned the infield, and most of the errors have come from the middle of that infield, right? New shortstop Maui Ahuna, who has been terrible out of Kansas, right? He was an elite level pickup from Tennessee.
He's a liability defensively.
He's been awful like just mind-blowing errors. Christian Moore has been bad at second base too, but their first baseman, Blake Burke, and this is hard to do as a first baseman, 9 errors, right? I mean, they're just bad defensively.
Yeah.
Right. And there's no bones about it. And that's not a recipe for success against this Vandy offense. Right. I mean, almost more than any team in this conference, guys, they hit a lot of ground balls, right? You see a lot of high choppers and that's strategically, right? They do that. They probably teach a lot of that on purpose because they have so much speed. They have so much athleticism on this team. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've seen somebody beat out an infield ground ball that you don't usually see, right, Trev? I mean, it'll be an Enrique chopper to the 6 hole. He'll beat it out easily, right? And RJ Austin kind of chopper up the middle. He'll beat it out. You know, you've got Diaz who has nice speed. Noland has good speed. Vastine brings an element of, Chris Maldo as well. So I'll say this, Trev, if they don't play, if Tennessee doesn't play well defensively, they're going to make them pay, as you said, Will, right? I mean, and it could get ugly. Right now, it is in Knoxville, but still, I mean, players are players, matchups are matchups. If that happens and Tennessee coughs it up, this could get ugly.
Yeah, I agree. And two, I think we need to reiterate for those I've watched almost as long as it's the same time, and even if Vanderbilt's playing at the same time, and I'm not at the Hawk, I'll flip back and forth between Vanderbilt Tennessee games. I've watched almost every single Tennessee game, not midweeks, but like I keep up religiously. I hate watch Tennessee. If you don't follow Tennessee baseball very closely, I can't reiterate what Bill said enough. This is not the same team as last year. It's really not. Last year, they had truly dominant pitching. Their best guy, Chase Dolander, comes back. Listen to this. And I want to get to this, too, because you brought up really good points about their defensive metrics. Batters who face Chase Burns are batting, what is it? They have an OBP of 308 against Chase Burns, an OBP of 302 against Dolander, and against Drew Beam, an OBP of 317. And now for their BABIP, so for those of you who don't know, BABIP stands for batting average on balls in play. It's an advanced sabermetric. Basically, all it means is anytime the bat hits the ball and the ball is in play, like what is that player's average on getting on base? So average once the ball's in play. Chase Burns has a BABIP of 3. So anytime Chase Burns allows contact in play, the batter gets on base almost 4%. Chase Dolan 32 or 327. 7. As whenever time the ball's put in play, guys get on base almost 33% of the time. Drew Beam, 328, same thing. And it goes to show that these guys' defensive metrics are terrible. And so, like I said, I cannot reiterate enough. This is not even close to the same baseball team. I mean, even in their pitching, which was a strong suit, it's down. Dolander looks awful. Like he really does. I think he's got like a 4.58 ERA, and he's their guy.
Mm-hmm. That's what I'm saying too, Trev. Like those 3 pitchers last year, I mean, that was considered the best pitching staff in the country. And they coming into this season, they were still considered the best pitching staff in the country. And I still think they're still up there, right? I mean, these aren't
Chase Dolander is projected to be a top 20. I believe it's 20 MLB draft pick. They've got him going to the Reds right now, which sucks. I would die if he went to the Reds, but he's a top 20 draft pick still.
Yeah, and so they're like those are draft guys, right? I mean, they're going to be playing professionally. But you look at the last season, they were on such a good offensive team. They never had any pressure on them.
No.
Right? I mean, they were pitching with leads. After the first inning, they get on the mound, they're pitching with a 4-5-0 lead because they just hit 3-4 home runs. Right.
Yeah.
So they were pitching with leads. They were confident this season offensively. I said it 240, right, in conference play. I mean, that's bad. Like, that's really bad. So, this offense hasn't helped the pitchers. I'll say Drew Beam has pitched really well. He's been the one guy that has pitched well. Dolander and Burns have not. But this Lindsey kid they got going on Friday, they just started him last week against Arkansas for the first time. And he was a little shaky, but he's a good pitcher. So I think that's a key, right? What happens Friday night?
Yeah.
And that's always a key in every series, right? Like, whoever comes out, maybe puts up a 3 or 4 spot in one of the early innings. If Vandy can do that, Tennessee crowd is going to hit the exits, right?
Yep.
They're going to head back to wherever they live and not watch that game, right? So, and then all of a sudden the crowd's out of it. The players are out of it. Tony Vols is falling asleep. They're out of it. So, do you take the crowd out? And I think that's one of my keys, right? Don't let the crowd get into it. Don't give Tennessee fans anything to cheer about early, right? Because don't give up that early bomb. That's to Carter Holton, right? So if you give up an early bomb, Tennessee fans, all of a sudden they're into it. The Vols feed off of it. So, but for Tennessee guys, if they play to their identity and they play smart baseball, ironically, I think they can win this series, right? But I think Vanderbilt, obviously, they have to play one of their worst, right? I mean, if
Vanderbilt has to implode,
right? And I think that's also possible because this is an experienced team, but they're still right. They're still fairly young, right? I know RJ Schreck is experienced. You've got some other experienced pieces on there, but the Tennessee crowd is going to show up, right? I mean, it's Knoxville. I mean, and it's Vandy. I mean, the VandyBoys are coming to town. This crowd's going to show up. But Will, as long as Vandy plays the way they've been playing, they're going to be fine, right? There's the risk. Tennessee can win this series, but a lot has to go right for them to win. That's what I'm trying to get across.
Learned my lesson. I learned my lesson undervaluing regular season away matchups during basketball season when I was overconfident with Vanderbilt going in to the LSU game that they lost in the midst of that win streak, and I lost quite a bit of money on. But this Tennessee volunteer baseball team, we mentioned how poorly they've played this whole year, and they've pretty much dropped out of what was pretty much considered to be like a top 10 team, no doubt, going into this year, and pretty much fallen out of the rankings, like you said, maybe on the bubble in some projections, but not where they thought they would be at all. But they're still 21-4 at home, and they're 4-2 in conference.
Yes, they're good at home.
So they are good at home in their Cracker Jack ballpark. Okay, they are. So I don't think I would go as far as to say that they have to implode, but I think Vanderbilt has to play not their best, and Tennessee has to play above the level that they have been playing at. So I don't think it's as far as to say like an implosion. I think if this was a home series, like in the reverse, I would go that far and say Vanderbilt has to implode and Tennessee has to play their best. But on the Cracker Jack Stadium thing, I just want to say it's not.
I wanted to talk about that.
The measurements are less. Okay. Like, yes, like Lindsey Nelson is a small ballpark. Okay. Going through the readings, I just want to get to this real quick and throw it in here because I know it bothers everyone. Lindsey Nelson, left field 320, left center 360, center field 390, right center 360, right field 320. Okay. Now let's read the Hawk. And then I'm going to explain why the it doesn't tell the whole story. But the Hawk is 310 to left, less than
with the monster.
Yeah, with a freaking Fenway monster.
That's
Tennessee's fence in right field is like it's 4
it's a short
feet.
porch. It's a short porch.
Quote unquote mini green monster is only 2 feet shorter than the real one. So I just want to point that out as well.
Is that
I
true?
don't think most people. Yes, look it up.
Wow!
Look at that
I
stat,
did
by
not
the way.
know that.
Wow.
Willie
I looked that
stats.
up. Yeah, that's correct. Unless that's wrong, and then I apologize. But
Willie
left
stats.
center, 375 at the Hawk versus at Lindsey Nelson 360.
Which is
Center field
average.
400 versus Lindsey Nelson's 390. Right center field 360
330
at Lindsey Nelson, 375 at the Hawk. Right field 330 at the Hawk, 320 at Lindsey Nelson. It is a Cracker Box Stadium. And when you hurl that insult and say that to Tennessee fans about why they're hitting so many home runs and why that benefits them at home, no one argues against you, or they just put the side-by-side comparison.
We just hit home
that
runs.
tells the story.
Yeah.
I don't understand how this just continuously is like accepted. Nobody even tries to defend it. And it would be like playing on a 90-yard football field and saying, look how many points we put up at home. Like, no shit. You have a shorter field than everyone. Of course you hit more home runs with a tiny little wall in front of your 320-foot left field.
And Trev, let me throw this at you. RJ Schreck, a couple of years ago in the Knoxville Regional against Wright State, right? When he played at Duke, he hit 3 home runs against Wright State at Lindsey Nelson Stadium in right field, right? He mashed one. I mean, it was a no-doubter. And then he hit one to right center, and I think he hit another one to left. So that plays into it, right? I mean, Tennessee plays there, but the other team plays there as well. So that's
Parker Nolan with his
I want to see a
Oppo
lot of home
jacks.
runs. I want to see a lot of home runs.
Well, and I think we will. It's going to be great weather.
I think it's going to carry off the river.
Yeah. So it could be, so we could see some high scoring games. One more thing, guys, before we might just make predictions. I had a question from Ben McKee. He covers Tennessee. He asked me to answer 5 questions, right? He covers them for 24/7. And, he asked me a really good question. He said, with how last season's series went, how fired up do you feel Vanderbilt will try to stick it to Tennessee? He said, I imagine Vandy fans are also looking to stick it to Vol fans this weekend as well. And I would agree with that. Here's what I said. I'm going to give you my answer and y'all react. I said, knowing Tim Corbin, there won't be a single mention of last season's series inside that dugout, right? Inside that locker room, the team meeting room. This coaching staff, like many others around the country, they treat each series as its own, right? Each season as its own. If anything, I think there will be some players who use last year's sweep as motivation, but I doubt the coaching staff has made reference to last season. Meanwhile, the fans' perspective is totally different, right? A totally different story. For diehard Vandy fans, that sweep in Nashville last season stung.
It's one of the worst moments I've ever experienced as a Vanderbilt fan. And that's not an exaggeration. Like being there at the Hawk, one of the worst experiences as a fan.
It wasn't just how dominant Tennessee was. It was the way they carried themselves, right? The daddy hat, the mink coat, Tony Vols, Tony V going out there and arguing about the bat, right? The Vandy fans that showed up that series, they were disgusted, right? They were not entertained by the theatrics of Tennessee last year. Tim Corbin, we all know, has built one of the best programs in the country. And for Tennessee's squad to walk into the Hawk and wipe the floor with them, I mean, that sent shockwaves across this fan base, right? You know it, Will. You know it, Trev. Y'all are in the fan base. Baseball's always been a sport that Vandy could hang their hat on, right? And that sweep, I think, at least made some fans rethink that perspective, right? Is Vanderbilt going, are they declining, right? Mm-hmm. Now, I didn't agree with that, but there were a lot of fans thinking that, right? Tennessee has the recruiting advantage. That was real.
Very real.
It might have been an overreaction, but that's how fans think, right? That's how fans think.
It's not logical,
That's how they think, right? There may be some extra juice from players, but I doubt Corbin will let his team act classless in any way. Right. I did tweet out they're bringing a speaker, right, and I don't know if they're going to have it in the dugout. They might have something wild planned for this weekend. I doubt it, but I would expect a lot of chirping from the Vandy fans there that make the trip. I know we were debating making the trip, but guys, this is the weekend for Vandy fans, this is the weekend, right? Sins must be atoned for, as you said, Trev. So, well, I guess I'll start with you. What do you think about that answer? I mean, for the fans, I think I'm right. The players, I might be wrong. Maybe the players go and just shove it up Tennessee's butt. I don't know. But I doubt it because Corbin's their coach.
I think obviously you hit on everything perfectly as far as fans. I don't even need to discuss that because that is the emotion. You and Trevor just encapsulated it perfectly. But I think you're 100% right about how maybe the speeches up until right before the game will be approached by Tim Corbin and this staff. But there is, in the way that Tim Corbin speaks about Tony Vitello and that Tennessee baseball program, there is something, he can't hide it. It's never in anything he says. It's in like the tone or kind of how he reacts when a question is mentioned. He really dislikes Tony Vitello and everything he stands for. I mean, you cannot build a more different type of program than what Tim Corbin has built in Nashville with the VandyBoys than what Tony Vitello is doing with the Vols. I mean, you are seeing the definition of class versus shit and fireworks in orange and white. I mean, what they are doing and what they had done the last 2 years is completely unsustainable. Because at the end of the day, you're just not going to consistently recruit high quality, high effort, hardworking players that are going to be drawn to mink coats and daddy hats. And that phrase right there will get made fun of if you clipped out what I just said and people would say, no, that's not true. But it is.
I'm clipping that, by the way.
But 16, 17-year-olds being recruited and choosing between going into a Major League Baseball program, which is number one, or developing for the next 3 years in college baseball. A lot of times that is being made differently than in other sports. It's being made alongside parents saying, I have this opportunity to play professional sports. Am I ready to just hop into the professional ranks and not be guided through my development? Or do I want to go to a college program that's going to develop me further and turn me into a better prospect? And daddy hats and mink coats just aren't what are going to draw in the top MLB prospects to say, yeah, alongside my parents, I'm going to send my kid here the next 3 years to turn him from a low end first round, second, third round pick in the MLB draft to turning him into a can't miss prospect. I'm going to choose this Vanderbilt program every time. So I think there is something that Tim Corbin's going to add in. There's a little bit of juice. There's a little bit of something, man. Like Tim Corbin does not like Tony Vitello. And I think if he was put on a lie detector test, there'd be no way that he could disagree with what I just said.
It literally makes me, I've been stewing on this game for a while now. And earlier, Billy from the TDR account tweeted a clip of Tony Vitello going on about Vanderbilt scholarships. And I just want to, I don't want to go on a rant because, this argument is so tired, man. We've heard it for years. But before the series even starts, Vanderbilt wasn't even in Knoxville yet. Their buses had not got to Knoxville yet. And Tony Vitello is like, well, they get a disadvantage and they get more scholarships and it's hard to recruit against them.
He said everyone in the league has been trying to beat them in recruiting for the last 20 years for a variety of reasons.
He couldn't not say the last part. He couldn't.
And it was the last.
Shot
it was his last answer. It was his last. It was the last 20. It was the last 20 seconds of the press availability. That's how soft he is.
And here's the thing. Everybody in the league has been trying to figure that's not true. Tennessee has never, ever, ever been on Vanderbilt's level. They haven't. We are not recruiting the same kids. You are not recruiting the same kids that Tim Corbin has been recruiting. You can't say that, we're trying to figure out how to beat them. No, You are picking up sloppy seconds. It's been like that since Tim Corbin came. Like, that's just not a true statement. You are not in Vanderbilt's league. You have never, ever been in Vanderbilt's league. We literally let Ethan Smith say, bye-bye, bud, and go to your program, think he fit. Like, that is
Look
just
how that turned
Vanderbilt
out.
rolls. Yes, we are not on the same level, my guy. And you know what? For a variety of reasons, get more scholarships. I wish, and this isn't gotcha journalism, because I'm not a journalist at all. I'm just some like idiot who has access to a mic, and like you guys let me like just spew off into it. But for once, literally just once, I wish a reporter would ask these head coaches whenever they're whining and moaning about scholarships, "Hey, coach, why do they get more scholarships?" Ask them. And you know what? They're going to be
Maybe
like,
they're the
"I
only
don't."
private school in the SEC. God forbid.
And
Like,
well, and so you're like, okay, well, why are they putting in more scholarships? Oh, it's because of this thing called Opportunity Vanderbilt, to where Vanderbilt has allowed uh underprivileged and disenfranchised kids to get an affordable education. God
yes.
forbid we let disenfranchised kids get an affordable education at the most prestigious university in America. And you want to whine and moan about kids in education because it loses you ball games? Buddy, recruit harder. It's Vanderbilt. We are not like this big, large institutional state university. You have more resources than us. I don't want to hear you complain. You have way more resources than Vanderbilt. You have more money. You have more support from the brass historically. Recruit harder. Quit whining and go out and recruit. Like,
And
I don't get it.
here's why Tony said that. He's pissed, right? He's pissed. He's got the VandyBoys rolling into his stadium, about to just dominate them, right? I mean, that's likely what's going to happen. Now, right, Tennessee can hang in there maybe, but Vanderbilt is on a mission, right, to suffocate Tennessee this weekend. I mean, let's face it.
And he knows it's coming.
And
he's
Tony,
just trying to get ahead of it.
Yes, he's trying to build in excuses for this weekend. And say, oh, Vanderbilt beat us because they have opportunity. Vanderbilt. No, Tony. You're in the NIL era, right? You're in the transfer portal era. You paid Maui Ahuna a lot of money to come play for you, and he sucks, right? He's awful. You have a Cincinnati transfer, Griffin Merritt, who is terrible, right? Just hasn't performed. So Tony was all pissed off earlier today in his presser and sounded off. So good for him. I don't think Tennessee fans care. I think they're sick of this team, quite frankly. But for Tim Corbin, I don't think Tim's going to see that. But if someone on the team or that has traveled with them shows that to Tim, honestly, he won't really care. He'll shove it off. He'll shrug it off. But, he shouldn't care, right? But I kind of want somebody to show that to him. Just give him that extra devil on the shoulder.
He's totally seen it. And like the whole thing, like,
by the way, real quick, sorry, Trev.
It's got
17.6 thousand views on Twitter, that video we posted. And a lot of quote tweets, a lot of activity. So I would be surprised if somebody has seen that within
they've totally seen it. I think someone probably showed that to Corbin the moment it hit the internet. But to like complain about this NIL, Tony, one of the biggest boosters to your school owns an oil company. Oil. The most like we're talking black gold here. He owns he owns the Browns. What are you moaning about?
Haslam.
You have more opportunities than anybody. C Spire, like you have more opportunity than anybody else. Stop. Like, you literally have an oil slumlord who is giving you money. What are you talking about? Like, I don't get it.
There is also this. So there's two sides. There's like, number one, do you know why? Like you mentioned, Trevor, why Vanderbilt?
I wish someone would ask why did they?
So number one is
scholarships?
That, and then also let's compare and contrast the cost of attending Vanderbilt versus the cost of attending Tennessee, and just play out the difference in that on having some guys that are not on full scholarship on your roster that have to take out loans. But getting past that this is such a good example of like the hypocrisy of every other school traditionally, as a publicly funded power in the SEC, has clear advantage over Vanderbilt in that they have to show where money goes throughout the years of these SEC funds. And so these SEC funds have had to be poured back into the athletic programs because they're being publicly audited. So Vandy doesn't have that advantage because they're private. So those funds were never pushed into the athletic programs, giving you what you see today. Candace Storey-Lee trying to change it. But it's just known in everyone's minds that, like, yeah, before NIL, schools like Tennessee and Alabama, Georgia, whatever, they were paying guys. Like, you had boosters were paying, giving guys houses, whatever it was. And now in the NIL
NCAA
era,
hearing right now, like today.
Exactly. And now in the NIL era, it's like now you're just doing it openly. So now, like, on one side, the scholarship advantage is just like, it's the NIL era. Come on, man. Everybody's paying. Like, these top programs are basically pay for play, even though the NCAA said that would never happen. But the other part is the SEC, it just means more everybody is bending the rules. And this isn't even bending the rules. This isn't even cheating. This is just giving scholarships to guys.
It's taking what you have.
A private university. And it's using every tool at your disposal to the 100% maximum. And I think every other SEC school uses tools that aren't even at their disposal to 150% maximum. Because if you're telling me that every single SEC school is playing by the rules, then you are one of the dumbest human beings on the planet. There is constant cheating and underhanded deals going on in college athletics.
Real quick, let me say this, Trev, real quick. The really good, knowledgeable college baseball coaches have never complained about opportunity Vanderbilt, right? It's the Mississippi State head coach because they lost in Omaha to Vandy. Yep. They start complaining, right?
NC State.
Yeah, NC State, right? But you never heard the elite level, like Paul Maneri never brought up this opportunity Vanderbilt, right? And even a lot of the others, like who's another dominant head baseball coach? Louisville's Dan McConnell, I think his name is.
Yeah.
You've never really heard him bring it up, right? It's the rival Tony V. It's NC State. It's Mississippi State. It's the public
Arkansas.
state schools. Yeah. The fact that they start complaining, I know we're going on a tangent here, but the fact they start complaining about Vanderbilt and opportunity Vanderbilt and the scholarships, when you are a public state school with all kinds of resources and all kinds of money,
taxpayer dollars
at your disposal, it's sad. It's like they give in and they give the classic old tired excuse of, for a variety of reasons. Don't give me that, Tony. That's ridiculous.
It's such an unnecessary thing to throw in.
And like Tony, like you,
like
Will, opportunity Vanderbilt is
legal. The reporter literally asked him, "Oh, what do you think about Vanderbilt this weekend?" That's it. Tony couldn't even talk about Vanderbilt without saying, "Oh, they have these advantages." But sorry, go ahead, Trev.
I totally agree. It's like you've been like, "Oh, Enrique Bradfield is like one of the most electric players in college baseball and one of the best defenders and is going to be a first-round pick." RJ Schreck is hitting the cover off the ball. They have one of the deepest pitching rotations in all of college baseball. You could have said a multitude of things. You could have said that they are the number 4 nation and they're going to be really hard to beat. All those are facts. But Tony, like, you want to know what's cheating? Opportunity Vanderbilt is legal. But do you want to know what's cheating? Juicing your bats. Hot bats are cheating. Going to Maui Ahuna during a dead period, that's cheating. Juicing Drew Gilbert with human growth hormone and like DECA and illegal steroids. Tony, that is cheating. Do not come to me and be like, they have advantages. You injected steroids into your guys. Don't talk to me about cheating. I don't want to hear this whole cheating thing. And it makes me so mad because like I said, I wish for the love of God, someone should be like, Tony, what is opportunity Vanderbilt? Why is it there? He's like, well, I don't know. It's to get poor kids the education. God forbid. If that's where you want to hang your hat, then fine. We have a different.
My point is
that's fine. Just admit it, though. My whole
point is, like, you don't even have to go into it as much as that, Trevor. Like, and even give the guys, because they will just say that's just a story to cover up, and they'll brush that off. Okay, fine. Vanderbilt kind of uses their influence as a private institution to give scholarships to students that they want to kind of help out the baseball program and give them some extra benefit. Fine. We'll admit to that. Let's have a bad for bad going on right now inside the athletic department. And let's have a rule bend/break for rule bend/break. And let's go violation for violation, baby. What's currently going on, let's open up the books, because I will bet a lot of fucking money that there is a lot more shady shit going on inside of the UT athletic department right now across all their programs than inside of the Vanderbilt Commodore athletic.
No.
So this is not a game that I think Tony Vitello wants
Vols,
to play to the end.
They're definitely a clean program.
Tennessee?
Come on.
Man, Tennessee, man,
What?
somebody from the UT program just being unable to see the full picture of their statements and understand the full ramifications of what they're saying due to lack of intelligence. Never seen that before, man.
That's why, gentlemen, that's why this series has meaning, right? That comment from Tony V, that sweep last year, right? This is a meaningful weekend. And this is coming from Vanderbilt fans, diehard Vandy fans. I think most diehard Vandy fans listen to this podcast, and I think they will relate really well to everything we just said. I know we went into a tangent about Tony Vitello, but real quick, guys, we're going to get to Chris Burke, college baseball analyst. I'm not expecting a sweep, but I do think Vandy takes 2 out of 3 in Knoxville, right? It'll be interesting to see if they play with an added fire after losing to Tennessee 4 times. As you mentioned, Will, last year, most of the guys on this team experienced that. They're older now.
God, I forgot about that SEC tournament loss.
Yeah, I mean, tack that on.
And I totally forgot about that one.
Tack that on. I was there in Hoover. It was brutal.
Oh,
obviously, Tim Corbin and the staff, they're not talking about last year in the meeting room, in the dugout. But there are definitely some players that took last year's beat down personally, right? I mean, Tennessee, in 4 games, they dominated Vanderbilt. Right. So, and that hasn't happened. That doesn't happen. That shouldn't happen. And it's not going to happen this weekend again. Again, if a sweep happens, it happens. I wouldn't be surprised. But I think Vandy takes 2 out of 3 this weekend. Real quick, guys, before we get to Chris Burke, I'll start with you, Will. Then we'll finish off with Trevor's pick and his classic hype speech. So get ready, Trev. But Will, real quick.
I'm going to go the absolute mirror of what you just said, Billy. I'm going to go with my heart prediction and go 3. They're going to sweep them 3-0 in Knoxville. But I would not be surprised to see Tennessee beat them, whether it's, the weird times, whether it's 11 a.m. On Saturday and then again on Sunday. The Eastern times are just so odd, but I'm going to go with the sweep, man. I just think, like what you mentioned, these guys are a year old. There's an extra amount of focus lasered in onto this game. And I think the Indiana kind of uncharacteristic, sloppy Indiana State loss midweek, even though that Indiana State team is very talented, may have been more telling of players looking forward to the weekend than anything else. Is like, there's no way this wasn't circled on the calendar for these players and the coaching staff, regardless of what they say publicly, just like the football program next season with Kentucky. I mean, that's going to be circled on the calendar. This times 10 based on what happened last season, Tennessee going 4-0 and how it happened in Nashville. So I'm going with my heart, sweep for the VandyBoys, which I don't know if you guys realize, but that's an ominous sign that I'm feeling this way.
Will's bringing the brooms out. Vandy fans, buckle up. Trev, what you got?
I mean, this Vanderbilt team is better than this Vols team in every single aspect. There's not a portion of Tennessee Vols baseball to where they have the edge over Vanderbilt. Not a single one. Not starting pitching, not bullpen, not defensive play, not bats. Vanderbilt can play home run ball and we'll do this new school, just dinger and strikeout, or we'll dink and dunk you and play Vanderbond. We'll do whatever we want to you. There's nothing like you can do to stop it. Vanderbilt is better in every aspect. I wouldn't put it. It would not go. I wouldn't think that Tim Corbin would bring up last year, because he doesn't seem like that guy. And we've heard from former players that he's not that guy. But my God, like you said, Will, he hates this guy. Like Tony Vitello is the antithesis to Tim Corbin. He was created in a lab to be the polar opposite of Tim Corbin. Tim Corbin, an old school baseball guy, respect the game. Tony Vitello, this new age dude who just wants to bat flip, daddy hat, mink coat. Well, your guys from last year aren't here anymore, Tony. And sorry to break the news to you. Have 23, 24, 22-year-old guys anymore. You got guys who are this age as literally everybody. Can you hear me now?
We got you. Yeah, you cut out a little bit there, Trev. You're back though.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. This
just a little,
a
little bit.
Tony Vitello has hacked the mainframe, and he does not want Vanderbilt fans to hear this. But literally hell or high water cannot stop me right now. Tony, you dug your own grave. It's over. It was over before the buses even showed up. And whenever you made those stupid comments about, well, they have all these advantages. Sorry, buddy, but you're shoveling dirt on yourself. It's over. The Vols are done. You guys, no more COVID guys. You got regular old guys now, and they suck. They're terrible. Vanderbilt had an anomaly last year. Last year was an outlier. And you know what outliers are, Tony? They're not the real thing. They're just like these once blue things. That's what outliers are. And Vanderbilt is back on track. This is the Vanderbilt that has always been here. And you got what's coming to you. You're going to get swept. Lindsey Nelson Stadium is a dump. Like Will said, Cracker Jack Stadium, not even a real ballpark, a Little League Stadium dimensions. Vanderbilt is going to hammer the hell out of these guys this weekend. Vanderbilt 3-0 sweep. It's not even close. Vanderbilt wins by at least 3 runs each game.
Y'all remember the Tom Brady and Rob Gronkowski videos after they won the Super Bowl, right? The song "We Ain't Going Nowhere." They said, still here. That's what Vandy's going to be doing after this weekend. We're still here. We're not going anywhere. Tim Corbin's still our coach, and Vanderbilt is hungry. They're starving this weekend, right? They're ready to be let off the leash and unleashed and dominate Tennessee this weekend. Again, 5 o'clock Friday, 11 a.m. Saturday, which is weird because it's Eastern time, and then Sunday at noon. So get ready, buckle up, Vandy fans. We've got a great interview coming up with Chris Burke, college baseball analyst for Tennessee. I know he's a Vol. I know he is a Vol, but he knows everything about SEC baseball. He played at Tennessee. He loves this rivalry between Vanderbilt and Tennessee. And quite frankly, guys, I love this rivalry too, right? Like I enjoy the fact that Tennessee has gotten to a respectable level and they can make this rivalry fun for once. But tonight there are sins to be atoned for, guys. I say tonight, this weekend.
There we go.
I'm already ready.
You're right, Billy. I mean, that right there, I know we're closing it out, getting to Chris Burke, but you said it. I mean, there's the part of you that's like, Tony Vitello is so dislikable, and it just gives you a little bit of kind of the memories of like Bruce Pearl, Kevin Stallings, like really guys that the other side can hate and dislike. And
Hatred.
The fact that Tim Corbin is so stoic and has had so much success and is just so by the book, that can make him in a way unlikable, in the complete opposite way that Tony Vitello is unlikable. But there is something to be said for Tony Vitello being the hateable figure that he is and making this rivalry. Well, rivalry
He's the
might
heel.
be a strong word, but he's the heel. Exactly. And right now,
Ball
I
fan.
hate to say it, like Rick Barnes and Josh Heupel, especially Rick Barnes and Josh Heupel so far, I mean, they're kind of likable guys. So it kind of takes away a little bit of that, especially Rick.
I love the fact that Tony Vitello is hateable.
It's hard for me to dislike Rick Barnes. I can dislike Josh Heupel just because he's ugly.
Screw him. I hate Rick Barnes. Ball fans, this weekend, you're not going to listen to this. I don't know if Billy's going to clip it. I have a message for you. Whenever you get your tail handed to you this weekend, you and your sorry coach are going to be all over the internet talking about, we don't care about baseball. We remember last year. We have the receipts. You may forget.
I do not forget. I've bookmarked your tweets. I'm coming for you. I will be in a dark room on my laptop for 12 straight hours. I'm coming for all of you. I don't forget. Vandy Nation doesn't forget. If you don't, shut off your phones this weekend. Cancel your phones. Shut them off if you don't want to see me, because I'm coming for you. I don't forget.
God forgives Hack Squat Jim Duggan.
You better pray. You better pray to God for mercy, because God knows I will not show mercy.
Vandy, Tennessee this weekend, the number 4 ranked team in the country, Vandy and Tennessee in Knoxville at the Cracker Box, Lindsey Nelson Stadium. Buckle up. It's going to be a fun weekend, but stay tuned. Chris Burke from ESPN is coming up here on the Door Report. Chris Burke, college baseball analyst for ESPN and Tennessee alum as well. 2001 first team All-American in Knoxville, all kinds of accolades with Tennessee baseball, and he has called a lot of Tennessee games. Called last year's Vandy-Tennessee game. Of course, this weekend we got Vanderbilt and Tennessee in Knoxville. Unfortunately, Chris is not on the call this weekend. Chris, I think that's a crime. You were made to call this series.
Well, I had a lot of fun calling it last year. I'm actually going to be doing Florida and South Carolina, so that'll be a fantastic matchup as well. And my first live look at the Gamecocks. I haven't actually had a live look at the Commodores either, so I'm excited about that. I've got 2 games with them coming up against Alabama, but it's certainly going to be juicy this weekend in Knoxville.
Oh yeah, and you mentioned South Carolina. That's a team that Vanderbilt just beat, took two out of 3 from. So obviously we'll talk a little bit about that. But I want to dive into this Vanderbilt Tennessee rivalry that has sort of sputtered up here in the last few years under Tony Vitello at Tennessee, and of course Tim Corbin at Vanderbilt. Last year you were on the call for a wild series. Of course, Tennessee went into Nashville and swept Vanderbilt. You told me off air that was the start of the polarization of Tennessee baseball. So from your perspective, how has it grown, and what has it been like for this club this year to kind of try to bounce back after such a dominant year, but you lost so many of those contributors after last year?
Man, I tell you what, I think it's a very good lesson for everybody. And see, the Vanderbilt fans have been, Vandy's been in the mix and in the spotlight for 20 years, right? So the Vandy fans, even the ones that maybe weren't on board right away, the Vandy fans have seen the ebbs and flows and the ups and downs. And, really the Tennessee fan base as a whole, didn't really get into college baseball, honestly, until probably midway through 21. I mean, if we're being honest. And so all they've known is these mountaintop moments. I mean, obviously you had the valley of losing in game 3 of the Super Regional last year, which is certainly a disappointment, but Tennessee's trajectory as a program was just like meteoric. I mean, it was insane, right? And now they're dealing with the reality of the Southeastern Conference baseball world, which is just hang around. Things can change real quick, right? And so when Tennessee left Nashville last year, Nashville was kicking rock. Vandy was kicking rocks. When Tennessee left Oxford last year, the Rebels were kicking rocks. And Tennessee kind of did that to a lot of people. Like when they left your stadium last year, you thought, "Oh my gosh, we need to recruit a whole new team. Like what's going on?" And yet they didn't even make the World Series, because that's just how hard baseball is and how quickly things can change. And so here you are, and Vanderbilt obviously competed their tails off and, heck, almost won their regional, right, at Oregon State. But like Tim Corbin has proven time and time and time again, he knows how to build a roster. He knows how to weather storms. He certainly knows how to recruit and knows how to develop. And so here we are a year later, Vanderbilt's leading the league, and Tennessee's scuffling to try to make the tournament at this point, but yeah, I mean, just kind of going down memory lane, this was the series on Friday night specifically where the legend of Mike Honcho was born. And, I
was watching the clip the other day, actually.
Yeah. Jordan Beck hits a home run, and Dominic Keegan picks up his bat and says, "Hey man, there's no sticker on this bat." And he gets called out, and things kind of go sideways. And then we interview Tony Vitello mid-game, and I ask him about it, and he says, yeah, he's actually a 35-year-old named Mike Honcho, and he shouldn't even be in the game. And the rest of the story. So just crazy how things can change in a year. And I think both teams are proof of that. Not that Vandy had some sort of bad year last year, but it wasn't a vintage Vandy season by any means. And here we are now with them on top of the SEC standings, and certainly have an opportunity to be a top 8 seed and be a host.
Chris, we'll talk about Vanderbilt, of course, a little bit more in this matchup, but one more on Tennessee this year. Are you surprised by how quickly it has happened? Now, I know they picked up Zane Denton in the portal. Maui Ahuna picked up a couple of pitchers. Is that just the nature of SEC baseball in your mind, or did you not quite expect this type of a fall? I'm not saying they have, I mean, they will still likely make the tournament. But I mean, I've heard some people, in doubt that they might make the tournament. So I don't quite believe that, but how would you describe the kind of how quickly they have dipped down, I guess?
Well, I would describe it a few ways. Number one, I was in the camp of Tennessee being a top 5 preseason team because just their pitching was, in my mind, looked like it was going to be so dominant. And, even though they replaced essentially their entire position player group, I thought, well, I mean, if they have a 2.5 ERA, I don't think winning 40, 45 games is going to be that hard if the other team's literally not scoring. And that's honestly how I thought they would pitch. I don't, when Chase Dolander and Chase Burns and Drew Beam are the best pitching rotation in the country, and they're all just a year bigger, stronger, faster, wiser. And you could argue that the bullpen's even better with Lindsey and Halverson and Kirby Cannell being back, Cam Sewell being back. You're like, well, I don't think the position player group has to be all that great for this team to be in the top 5, top 10. That's the way I looked at it. And I know people, Tony included, think that's crazy, but I don't think that's crazy. I think, because if you think about it, you bring back Christian Moore and Blake Burke, 24 home runs combined last year. And then Jared Dickey, who was hitting leadoff for them midway through the season before he got hurt. So, those are 3, even though they weren't everyday players for the whole season, those were 3 very proven pieces that they were bringing back. And you're bringing back a first-team All-American, or you bring in first-team All-American in Maui Ahuna. You bring in Zane Denton, who wasn't great at Alabama, but was, a veteran SEC third baseman. Griffin Merritt, who was the AAC Player of the Year. And you think, I mean, that sounds like enough to support a pitching staff that should be dominant. And so I think the biggest surprise is that, number one, the pitching hasn't been dominant. And if you look at their overall numbers, that might not sound fair, but at this point, 15 games into this conference slate, I don't even really look at the overall numbers anymore. I really just look at the SEC numbers.
Right. And
they're number 6 in the SEC in earned run average. But even more to the point, they're dead last in the SEC in fielding percentage in conference games. And so that has affected their run prevention greatly. So the ERA isn't awful relative to the modern day college baseball game, and they're about middle of the pack. But when you consider their fielding percentage and their lack of playmaking, if you just lump it all into run prevention, that has not been good. The one thing I'm not surprised by that I said from the jump is I thought this team was going to be very home-centric on offense. Because it was such a new position player group, I thought they would be a very different team offensively at home than they were on the road. And that has proven to be true. They're 1-8 away from Knoxville so far in conference play. So they've actually been much, they swept A&M and lost 2 out of 3 to Florida so far at home. The back half of their conference schedule has a lot more home, has one more home series than road series. So that sets up favorable. But the reality is, if they don't get it going specifically on defense, it doesn't really matter who's left on their schedule. They're going to have a hard time playing. So they're 5-10. They got 15 games left. The conventional math would say they need to go 9-6 to get to 14 conference wins, which is usually a lock to make the tournament. And yeah, you could argue whatever easy is in the SEC, it's a little easier the next 15. I would just say mostly just because they get 9 of those games at home. But they're not, a middle of the road ERA and a bad defense is not a winning formula regardless of who you're playing in the SEC.
Meanwhile, on the other hand, Chris, Vanderbilt is doing all those little things right now to win games, right? They're fielding well, they're playing Corbin small ball, they're having competitive at bats, so they're doing those small things. How would you, when you watch this Vanderbilt team, when you throw in the tape, what do you see? And do you compare it to a VandyBoys team of the past? Because I've watched Vanderbilt baseball for a long time. This team doesn't remind me of any of the past because they're so unique in their own way. Obviously dominant pitching, but you look at their record and you look at their hitting numbers. Yes, they're dominant in SEC play, but it's not like they have a bunch of monster power hitters that are crushing the ball.
Yeah, I think that I wouldn't call it vintage VandyBoys because there's Enrique Bradfield Jr. is an incredible talent. I think he's going to be a first-round pick, but he's not maybe a vintage dominant bat, right? Like Blade or Dansby or even Tony Kemp, who put up video game numbers.
Yep.
Yastrzemski, some of the Pedro Alvarez, some of the superstars that Vandy has produced. And then the pitching staff, but he is great in his own way. I'm a huge Enrique Bradfield Jr. fan. He just, it's not like you said, it's not the vintage
the dominant
power.
presence, yeah.
Yes. And then the pitching staff, Carter Holton, I think everybody thinks has a chance to be first round pick, but obviously been banged up lately. And so even though the pitching staff leads the conference in ERA and SEC play, and they've been fantastic, it's the pitching staff certainly lacks the headliners that you're used to seeing from a VandyBoys vintage pitching staff. Now, that being said, halfway through the season, they're throwing as many strikes and they're putting up they're not sub 3 like maybe some of those dominant Vandy staffs were, but they're just a tick above. So I bet you, I haven't got to see Scott and Tim yet this year, but I bet when I talk to them, they're going to say, hey man, this is as reliable and maybe as deep as some of those staffs, So I think that part's been very impressive. Vandy's not by any means deep into the transfer portal, but RJ Schreck has certainly been a huge addition to the offense. And I think if we're being honest, a big part of the conference is who you play and when you play them.
Yep.
It just is. And Vandy was not swinging the bat very well to start conference play, but they started conference play with 2 of the worst pitching staffs in the league. And they got off to, you still got to hit, right? It doesn't matter who's pitching, you still got to do it. And Vandy got off to a great start. And that is really good for your team's psyche. And so they've just kept that ball rolling and they find themselves just playing at a very high level.
You mentioned who they've played, and Ole Miss, Mississippi State, obviously bottom of the conference. Georgia is a team that's towards the bottom of the conference. Missouri is a team that's kind of been in the middle of the pack, a little bit better this year. Now, last weekend, South Carolina. That's where it really got real for Vanderbilt. I don't know how much of you got to watch, Chris. It was a really high-level series, great pitching. Obviously, Petrie at South Carolina and all those bats. Did that sort of cement anything for you? And because there's a lot of people saying, oh, Vanderbilt hasn't played anybody. Now they get a top 10 team in their house and they take care of them. So did that prove anything to you, or did you know?
Yeah, it did. Yeah. I think it did on a big level when you consider. Now I'm concerned about him, but when you consider the fact Carter Holton gave him 2 outs.
Yeah. I don't even think he got through the first inning. Yeah.
Right. It was 2/3 of an inning, and they win the series against the most offensive team, in the league, I think that is very loud. Now, again, I hope that doesn't mean that up, but they proved if they can win that series essentially without him helping, they can beat anybody. And, they've positioned themselves where they're going to be it looks like they're going to be at home all the way through the postseason. And obviously we know to get to Omaha, you got to beat a team like South Carolina, maybe not even quite that good, in a 2 out of 3 series. So the fact that they were able to do that is a really big deal. And so it does, to me, solidify that they are as good as their record would indicate. And just because maybe they play, let's just say they play 500 ball the rest of the way in the conference. Well, that probably will still win them the league.
Right. Yeah.
Right. What are they? What are they? 13-2? Are they 13-2 or 12-3?
13-2.
13-2. Yeah. So if they go 21-9, like they're winning the league.
Right. It's
I mean,
crazy.
that's just the math of it. Yeah. So people say, well, they got a hard schedule coming down the stretch. We'll see how they do there. Well, let's just be honest. I mean,
they could go 7-8 down the stretch.
They could go 7-8 and still probably. And number one, that doesn't mean that they're not as good as their record would indicate, because those teams that they're playing could all be in Omaha. So, especially if you count the South Carolina one that they just played. So, when I look at the top half of the SEC playing the top half of the SEC, I view it as like you would the major leagues. And if the Yankees play the Blue Jays, Rays in 9 games, they're tickled to death to go 5-4. Right. And they're not all that upset to go 4-5. I mean, that's just a reality of good versus good. Really, it's going 5-10 or 4-11 down the. Nothing they'll do will make me think less of their postseason chances, unless it just really gets rocky for them. You know what I'm saying? So they have positioned themselves to win the conference. And really all they got to do is just kind of hang in there the rest of the way.
All right, Chris, let's talk about this matchup this weekend. Obviously, you were there. As I said last year, Tennessee went into Nashville and swept Vanderbilt. I think it was for the first time in 2007, or they beat them in a series at home for the first time in 2007. I think that was the year. Going back to that and kind of connecting it to this year, how much of a factor does that play from the Vanderbilt perspective? And how much of a factor does that play on the Tennessee perspective, right? Because Tennessee wants to cement that and say, we're still the team in the state of Tennessee to beat, right? So would you say there's sort of equal motivation on both sides of this one this weekend?
Well, here's what I'll tell you. There's always different layers to these things, right? Mm-hmm. One of the layers is what happened last year and the bigness of the in-state rivalry and the fan bases. Okay. And that, I will just tell you, is so far removed from like the thought process in the coaching staff's offices this week. Now, it might be Tim Corbin would never say this. It might be a little more on the Vandy staff. One thing is, when they do have counts, like you're thinking we're going to go in there and sweep this group, and we might rub their nose in it a little bit. Like that might be, and that might be a little bit on the players' mind in the Vandy locker room as well. Okay, it is what it is. Tennessee put a bullseye on their own back. They did it to themselves. You got to roll with the punches, right? If you're going to talk the talk, you got to wear it when things get flipped on you. That's just the way it is, right? On the Tennessee side of things, I promise you, they're not thinking about anything other than how they can figure out a way to win the first game. Like, how do we win a series? Because that's just where they are, and they got to try to put the pieces back together one game at a time. And so really, to me, it's kind of the Vanderbilt perspective is let's keep the ball rolling. Let's go in there and not let a team that's on the rocks have a reason to find new life. So my guess is Tim Corbin's message might even be like, let a sleeping dog lie. Don't do anything overtly to get this team or fan base fired up. You know what I'm saying? Like Florida had Tennessee completely down and out 2 weeks ago, and then Caglione went out there and walked 6 in the first, and Tennessee scored 14 runs. And he really gave them reason to, oh, okay, we've got life here, and they pounced on it. You know what I'm saying? So it's really Vanderbilt's job to not give Tennessee any freebies, no gifts. And I would even argue, no, don't give them any. I wouldn't drag them into a fight. I would just show up, and this has always been the VandyBoys way, right? Just be overly professional, go about your business. Don't give them a reason to get emotionally invested. But if you're Tennessee, you're heck, they're still figuring out their pitching rotation and what their best 9 is on the field defensively. Like Tennessee's got a lot bigger problems than where the programs match up in a pecking order deal. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Chris, I got a couple more things on this matchup. Obviously, kind of an earlier start on Friday, 5 Central, SEC Network, 11 a.m. Saturday on ESPN2, and then 12 p.m. On ESPN2 on Sunday. A lot of eyes going to be on this one with the national audience. Obviously, I think they hope Tennessee would be a little bit better spot for this weekend. But what's the X factor for you, right? Like, what has to happen on the Vandy side for them to win, and what has to happen on the Tennessee side if they want to take 2 out of 3?
I think they go together. I think the X factor will be Tennessee's defense. And I'll say that for both teams. Vanderbilt is going to get on base, and they're going to steal a million bases. Anybody who wants to steal on Tennessee can. They're slow to the plate, and they've got catching issues, right? So that plays right into Vanderbilt's hand. So with that being said, if Tennessee cannot field the ball, they're going to have serious problems winning this series. They're going to have serious problems winning a game in this series if they can't field the ball, short of Dolander or Burns or Beam having some sort of 12 to 15 game strikeout game. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah. And I don't anticipate that happen. It hasn't happened yet this year other than Beam. Burns has had a couple 12 strikeout games, and Beam's had 1 10 strikeout game. But so to me, that's the X factor. The X factor is Vanderbilt putting the ball in play, consistently putting relentless pressure on Tennessee's shaky defense. And if they do that, the numbers say that's going to go very well for Vanderbilt. And if Tennessee doesn't flip the script on the way they've defended to this point, then they're going to have big problems. So I would just say, kind of the one X factor is how does Tennessee defend? Because if they don't do it at a much higher level than they've shown to this point, I think it's going to be very hard to win the series unless they figure out a way to hit 15 home runs or something like that to make up for it.
Yeah. Well, and Tennessee is desperate too, Chris, right? Like they may try a few new things that they haven't done, right? Who knows what their rotation's going to be, right? Does Burns start, or does he come in relief? Do they start the Lindsey kid on Friday, right? So there's a lot still up in the air. Does Carter Holton go for Vandy? Does Hunter Owen go? So there's still a lot to figure out with this series. And I'm sure the folks in Knoxville will welcome the VandyBoys with open arms this weekend.
Oh, it'll be a love fest, I'm sure. No, you bring up some good points there. Tennessee's a lot in baseball at every level. They're in this matrix where like they can't do anything right. Chase Burns had his best SEC outing of the year by miles, and it was when they brought him into like a 6-2 game they were losing. Right? You know what I'm saying? And so on one hand, you're like, well, that's a great sign, but they need him to have a whatever it was, 4 or 5 inning scoreless outing to start a game. That's what they need. Or if they bring him in when they have a 1-run lead. And so, they need timely performances to start happening. Nobody doubts the talent on their roster. But back to what I said earlier, so much of this league is when you play teams, where you play teams, and how your best players play circumstantially.
Right. Yeah.
And so that's the formula Tennessee's searching for that they haven't been able to find. And quite honestly, that's the formula that Vanderbilt has nailed to this point.
That's why it'll be interesting this weekend. Of course, Vanderbilt and Tennessee, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Chris's Vols and the Doors get it going. Chris, thanks for taking the time, and good luck. Where are you again? You're at South Carolina, Florida?
Yeah, I got South Carolina and Florida Thursday night. Should be a great one. You got Jack Caglione and Ethan Petrie, who are both, no matter what the national media says, and I guess that makes me part of it, are right in the mix with Dylan Cruz for SEC Player of the Year.
Wow.
So even though Dylan
Petrie?
Cruz is, I mean, it's just insane. Everybody's kind of crowned Dylan Cruz. I'm like, whoa. Like, let's not get lost in batting average.
Right.
Jack Caglione is leading the league in hits, total bases, and homers. And Ethan Petrie is first in the league in slugging, third in batting, second in homers, second in ribbies, second in OPS.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it'll be a good one.
It's crazy. Chris, thanks for taking the time, man. Have fun this weekend.
My pleasure. Thanks.
All right. See you.